This episode is brought to you by HASA. Liquid is clearly better. Liquid chlorine is the highest purity, works immediately, has no added cyanuric acid or calcium, and it will leave your pool safe, clean, and clear. And by the Bottom Feeder professional grade battery powered vacuum system. It sucks to clean pools, so cleaning pools sucks less. Get $100 off with code DVB100.
This episode is brought to you by Skimmer, the #1 pool service software in North America. With Skimmer, you can streamline your schedule, grow your revenue, and keep your customers coming back with 5-star service. Whether you're a one-person operation or an established team, Skimmer is your partner in success. Visit getskimmer.com/poolguy to try Skimmer for free for 30 days.
The Pool Guy Podcast Show. The Pool Guy Podcast Show. The Pool Guy Podcast Show.
Hi, and welcome to the Pool Guy Podcast Show. In this episode, I'm going to go over some common issues you will have with a DE filter. I'll go over, of course, some of the simpler things, and then I'll dive in to some more complex problems that you may run into with a diatomaceous earth filter. Are you a pool service pro looking to take your business to the next level? Join the Pool Guy Coaching Program. Get expert advice, business tips, exclusive content, and get direct support from me. I'm a 35-year veteran in the industry. Whether you're starting out or scaling up, I've got the tools to help you succeed. Learn more at swimmingpoollearning.com. Diatomaceous earth filters, or what they're commonly referred to as DE filters, are area specific. You may be working in Florida and not see one of these filters for years, and then one will pop up on a new account that you acquire. Or you may see these every day in California and Texas. So DE filters are definitely area specific. A lot of areas have sand filters and cartridge filters, and you don't see a DE filter. Now, DE filters are definitely going away here in California, mainly because of the regulations that are required to install one. So builders simply put in a cartridge filter, which doesn't have the same regulations that a DE filter has. Why are DE filters more regulated? Well, it's because of the diatomaceous earth. At least here in my county and most counties in California, they don't want you cleaning a DE filter in the street, having the residue from the DE filter going into the storm drains. And then you may be curious of why you can't do that. Well, actually, in Los Angeles County, diatomaceous earth is classified as a pollutant. It's a fine powder, and the diatomaceous earth is made out of fossilized algae or diatoms. It's natural, but it's not harmless. So DE grids trap oil, sunscreen, algae bacteria, metals, phosphates, and of course there's chlorine residue as well. And so if you wash it down the storm drain, which here in California the water goes to the ocean, it does potentially have a detrimental effect on the aquatic life that's in the ocean. And in your area, you may not have those regulations, but I would check definitely to make sure with your county and see where you can clean a DE filter. So since I'm talking about cleaning the filter, I'll go over where to clean the filter. The best place, in my opinion, to clean a DE filter is if there's a grass area at your stop. I find that whatever chlorine residue is on the grids doesn't really affect the grass. It's not going to kill like a patch of grass where you clean it. I haven't had that happen. And basically you want to clean it there, or you want to clean it somewhere where the water's going into the sewer line. And sometimes that's not possible in the backyard. So you may want to clean it in a planter. The problem with cleaning it in the planter is that over time, if you do it 2 or 3 times, the DE is like a clay-like substance, and it will actually kind of stay in the dirt there and then turn like a gray-white color over time, and you could ruin the planter. And for some reason, I find that DE in the planter does inhibit growth of foliage, so you won't have a lot of growth in that area. If there's like a dirt area back there that no one's using, clean the filter there. And one of the things you have to be cognizant of is the diatomaceous earth running into the street from a drain in the backyard. So if it does run into the street, that means it's going into the storm drains, at least here in Los Angeles County. Again, that water is untreated. It goes straight to the ocean or a river or creek, wherever you're at. and that could cause problems for you. And there's a pretty hefty fine here for diatomaceous getting into the street. I think it's somewhere around 5,000 in some areas even as high as 10,000. So you don't want any of that running in there. So a grassy area is perfectly fine. Or if there's a P-trap and it's going into the sewer line, then you're fine cleaning it there. So that's a problem in itself, where to clean the filter. You don't have that problem with a cartridge filter because you're just washing dirt off the cartridge filter. But for DE filters, they really don't want you cleaning it in the street, and you have to find a specific area to clean it. If there's just all cement back there, it's very problematic because if you've ever cleaned a DE filter, you know that the dust kind of just stays there forever. You'll hose it off, you'll hose the cement off, and still the dust will be there the next week. So that in itself, I think, is a pretty major problem. Another problem with DE filters is that if it's a top manifold filter and you take it apart, sometimes you have trouble putting it back together if you're inexperienced. This happens a lot out there. You'll take the top manifold off, you'll start pulling the grids out of the filter, you hose them off, and then you have them cleaned, you have the top manifold, you have a small bottom manifold, and you're scratching your head thinking, well, how does this go back together? I wasn't really paying attention when I took it apart. So I have a video on specifically how to clean this the easy way in replacing grids. So basically what you do is you take the top manifold off, and then you take one grid out, clean it, put it back in, take another grid out, clean it, or replace it if it has a tear in it, put it back in, take another grid out, clean it, replace it if you need to, hose it off, put it back in, and that way you have the same pattern in the filter as you had as it's supposed to be, and you just simply put the top manifold back on the grids. Pretty easy. I also have the hard way. If you took it apart and you weren't paying attention and you didn't take it apart in the tank, like I show you in that video, I have replacing all 8 grids and a top manifold and a DE filter the hard way. And this is basically what you need to do is put the top manifold on the ground and then build the filter upside down with the grids that go in there. And you'll know there's one short grid or one partial grid that goes in there right next to where the manifold goes in. So that's another thing about the top manifold filters. All the major manufacturers make this kind of filter. Pentair, Hayward, and Jandy. To me, I don't like that design. I really prefer the Pentair 4000 series filter with the top manifold on the bottom, which makes it a bottom manifold, and the grids are in a circular pattern on top. Very easy to clean. You just take a grid out, hose it off, and put it back into the manifold. Simple design. It's kind of like my video on putting it together the hard way because it's upside down inside the filter itself. Very effective. I like it, but I don't think Pentair really pushes that particular filter model. So let me kind of go over what's inside the tank, whether it's a top manifold or bottom manifold DE filter. The tank consists of course, the grids of the filter. Now these grids are a cloth-like material, and this is what gets coated by the diatomaceous earth. Inside the grids are a kind of plastic skeleton. One problem you may run into is that the filter has a lot of back pressure, maybe just because of the plumbing or the pump is really oversized, and this plastic frame will start to crack inside there. I've had this happen with many filters where you take out a grid and the plastic frame is kind of broken inside there. Not particularly something you have to worry about unless you have a lot of them broken. I usually will put it back in and use the grid if it has just a couple areas that are broken. But if it's really bad, the broken parts will actually pop through the fabric. So you have to be careful or cognizant of that problem and replace the grids when necessary. So that's one part of the filter, which are the grids. Now, if you have a quad D filter, there won't be grids. There'll be a cartridge type formation with 4 cartridges in there, but those aren't standard cartridges. They actually have the material like the regular grids on them, and it's an illusion of a cartridge filter, but they actually have the same material as the DE grids. I like the quad DE filters because you clean them much like a cartridge filter. You take off the small top manifold, then you'll pull each of the DE cartridges out. I'm going to call them DE cartridges, and then you hose them off. And to me, it's really simple, and I really like the design of those particular DE filters. But the cartridge material is a little bit thicker, and that holds the diatomaceous earth onto the grids or the cartridges. Then you have the manifold. Either it's a top manifold DE filter or a bottom manifold. Manifold basically is a part that's made out of plastic that connects to the top or bottom of the grids to give it a complete seal. And this is where the water flows inside the cartridges when you're backwashing the filter. And it's a necessary part, and it tends to crack as well. And I'll go over in a minute when the D grids or the top manifold is cracked in a filter. Then you have the air relief. The air relief is sometimes a thin tube in the center. You'll see a screen on top, or you'll see maybe like a sock type covering on top of it with a clamp. This is basically something that's necessary to release the air from the top of the tank that's trapped inside there. You do have an air bleeder valve on top that does a similar thing. You can use that, but the air pressure could build up in the filter if the air relief valve isn't working properly. I've been to many filters when I take off the top, since maybe the screen is missing or the thing is torn there, someone just put like a little twig in there to kind of stop diatomaceous earth from going into the filter. But it's a necessary part. Usually that's connected and the air goes out. Sometimes if you don't have that air bleeder valve in there, DE will leak back into the pool because there is a small little hole and diatomaceous earth can leak through it. So the air relief valve, the air bleeder that's inside the filter itself is important to kind of keep the air from building up in there. Kind of like, think of it like a wave, like an internal burp mechanism basically for the filter. So that's an important component, and it's often overlooked as an important part of the filter. And then you have, of course, the stem and the stem pipe where the water comes into the filter. So that's an important component of a DE filter. So it's a pretty basic setup. If you think about it for a minute, there's really not much to the DE filter. You have the grids, you have the top manifold, the bottom manifold, and then you have a stem pipe that comes in that lets the water into the filter. And that's the basic setup of the diatomaceous earth filter. Why were they so popular back in the day? Well, they were really popular because they're actually really effective. They actually will filter down to about 3 microns, which is the smallest particle of any filter out there on the market. Cartridge filters will filter down to about 20 microns, or 15 to 20, and then sand filters 30 to 40 microns. So DE filters are highly effective. So here are a few things that can happen to a DE filter, and if you notice any of these things, your DE filter probably has a problem. If you notice diatomaceous earth on the bottom of the pool, or if you notice cloudy, kind of gray water coming out of the return lines when you turn on the filter, or after cleaning the filter, if you notice all the diatomaceous earth goes back into the pool like a white cloud, there's a problem. There is a crack, torn grid, or cracked top manifold, or even something as simple as the air bleeder valve not actually being installed into the filter. Maybe it got lost, and maybe it got damaged. It's not there, and DE can leak out through that little hole. The stem pipe, also, there's a small O-ring on there that if it's missing on the stem pipe, it'll let diatomaceous earth into the pool. Basically, since diatomaceous earth is such a really fine powder, any small little crack on the top manifold or any kind of hole in the grid itself, even the size of like a pencil eraser, will cause diatomaceous earth to leak back into the pool. Now, you may not see this a lot of times initially, because one thing that happens to diatomaceous earth is that when it coats the grid, it becomes hard and clay-like. And this is a good thing because this is what traps all the dirt, algae, and everything onto the grid. So you may not notice a problem until you maybe backwash the filter. So when you backwash the filter, all the water kind of goes inside the grid. It kind of puffs it out and pushes everything off of the grid. And so if there is a tear in the grid, you won't really notice it if the pool is operating and you don't backwash the filter or take it apart to clean it, because again, it's like a clay-like substance and it won't necessarily leak back into the pool in that form. But when you backwash a DE filter, or when you take it apart and clean it and recharge it, the DE is kind of more in a powder form, and it's not quite that clay-like form, and it may push it off the grid enough to where it pushes it off where there's a hole in the grid. And then when you recharge the DE filter, you'll notice, and also when you backwash it, it stirs up everything in the tank too. So maybe some DE on the bottom comes up into the tank. So what happens after you backwash it and you put it back in filter mode, you're going to get some DE blowback into the pool. And this is one of those things where it's really frustrating. And you're like, oh man, I backwashed the filter. There's probably a torn grid or a cracked top manifold. Now I got to take it apart and find out where the problem is. And therein lies the drawback with a DE filter. It could be operating perfectly fine with no leaks into the pool, but when you do backwash it or take it apart and clean it, then the leak becomes really apparent. Now sometimes, of course, this happens during the normal operation of the filter, and this could be because the filter was overloaded and overworked. I had a customer that went on vacation to Europe for 3 weeks, and he basically made his house an Airbnb with all his friends. And they really killed this pool. And one thing that happened was when I turned on the filter one day, DE started shooting out of it. And I was like, okay, well, the grids definitely are torn. And I find that the partial grid is the one that gets compromised the most. It's a smaller grid, and I find that because of the pressure or whatever happens inside the filter, that grid tends to be the one with the hole in it most of the time. So I always carry extra partial grids because sometimes that's the only grid that needs to be replaced. So what you have to do when this happens is take the filter tank off the filter. I take the manifold off and I inspect it, the top of it. I turn it upside down because, by the way, the bottom of it can actually cave in and crack as well. So sometimes I know pool pros will take off the manifold and they'll forget to turn it upside down to look at the bottom. I've been guilty of that. And you put everything back together and DE's leaking in the pool. You're like, man, everything was fine. The grids are all intact. The manifold was fine on top. The stem O-ring was there. Why is it leaking? And then you take it apart again and you'll see like a crack on the bottom of the manifold. So, of course, inspect it carefully, top and bottom. And then you're going to take each grid out and inspect it. And I'm going to probably continue this in a part 2 where I talk about other problems of a DE filter, the backwash valve, and things like that. But I'll finish here by saying inspect all the grids carefully. Make sure that the stem pipe has an O-ring on there. And when you put the top manifold on, and this is a debate I was having when I first got in the industry with somebody, I was kind of talking back and forth to him. I'm like, well, when I put my DE filters back, I make sure that top is on so tight that nothing goes through. He's like, oh no, don't do that because you're going to snap the top of the grids. You know, they're really fragile. So there's a happy medium. I don't really tighten it all the way like I used to, but I tighten it enough to where you can't see any of the inserts from the top grid because they go into the manifold and they don't have cloth around them. So if you don't have the top manifold on securely or enough where you don't see, if you don't see cloth and the top manifold touching each other, then there's a potential for DE to get back into the pool. So make sure the top manifold is on there secure and that you can't see any of the grids themselves or the plastic part sticking out. It's got to be top manifold and all cloth on that kind of filter. Now the quad DE filters are really nice because all you do is put them back on and put that top manifold and you don't have to worry about it. So the quad DE filters are superior that way. But I'll continue and I'll talk about some more problems you're going to run into with a diatomaceous earth filter. If you're looking for other podcasts that I have here, you can find those on my website, swimmingprolearning.com. On the banner, click on the podcast icon. That'll take you to a drop-down menu of over 1,600 podcasts that I have here for you. And if you're interested in the coaching program that I offer, you can learn more at poolguycoaching.com. Thanks for listening to this podcast. Have a great rest of your week. God bless. This episode is brought to you by HASA, providing products that deliver clean, healthy water for every aspect of everyday life. The bottom feeder battery-powered vacuum system, portable, powerful, and only weighs 12 pounds. And Skimmer. Get Skimmer, America's #1 pool service software. Podcast listeners can try Skimmer for free at getskimmer.com/poolguy.